Ivar the Boneless, one of the most infamous and legendary Viking warriors of the 9th century, played a pivotal role during the Viking Age. His name has echoed through history as both a fearsome conqueror and a cunning leader. Born into a family of legends, Ivar was the son of the renowned Ragnar Lothbrok, a warrior king who had already carved his name into Norse lore. However, Ivar's legacy would not rest on the shoulders of his father's reputation alone. He was determined to create his own, and he did so by demonstrating extraordinary leadership, strategy, and brutality on the battlefield. The Viking Age was a time of relentless raids, invasions, and territorial conquests, with warriors constantly vying for power and wealth. It was in this atmosphere that Ivar thrived. His moniker, the Boneless, has puzzled historians and scholars alike, with theories ranging from physical deformities to metaphorical interpretations of his cunning and flexibility in war. Despite any possible physical limitations, Ivar commanded respect from his men and fear from his enemies, leading armies that left devastation in their wake. His most famous campaign was his leadership of the Great Heathen Army, a massive Viking force that invaded Anglo-Saxon England in the late 9th century. Ivar's intelligence on the battlefield, combined with his ruthlessness, allowed him to defeat formidable foes, including King Ella of Northumbria, who had previously killed Ivar's father, Ragnar. The victory over King Ella, culminating in the gruesome execution known as the Blood Eagle, solidified Ivar's place in Viking history. Though often remembered for his brutality, Ivar's strategic mind was equally legendary. He preferred to outsmart his enemies rather than engage in brute force when unnecessary, making him a complex and formidable figure in Norse history. His story is one of resilience, power, and revenge, marking him as one of the most iconic Vikings of his time. Ivar the Boneless was born into a family of immense historical significance, making his path to greatness almost inevitable. He was the son of two legendary figures in Norse history, Ragnar Lothbrok and Aslog. Ragnar, his father, was one of the most famous Viking kings and warriors, renowned for his daring raids, his leadership, and his insatiable quest for adventure and conquest. His exploits, chronicled in the sagas, included raiding the coasts of France, Britain, and beyond. He was a revered figure, known for his audacity and strategic brilliance. Ivar's mother, Aslog, was a seeress with mystical powers of foresight, and she, too, was deeply respected in Norse mythology. According to the sagas, Aslog was the daughter of Sigurd, the slayer of the legendary dragon Fafnir, linking Ivar to an even more ancient and heroic lineage. Growing up under the shadow of such parents, Ivar had the weight of enormous expectations on his shoulders. His father's fame and achievements meant that Ivar needed to prove himself in his own right, not merely as the son of Ragnar, but as a warrior and leader worthy of his name. This drive to carve out his own legacy would be a defining characteristic of Ivar's life. He was determined to go beyond the accomplishments of his father and ancestors, to be remembered not just as the son of Ragnar Lothbrok, but as a conqueror in his own right. Despite the expectations placed upon him, Ivar did not seek to simply imitate his father's tactics. While Ragnar was known for his bold raids and daring escapades, Ivar was more calculated and strategic, often opting for cunning over sheer force. This difference in approach helped him forge his own unique identity as a Viking leader. Ivar's cunning and intelligence became as legendary as his father's audacity, allowing him to lead the Great Heathen Army and achieve monumental victories that would cement his place in history. In addition to his father's warrior spirit, Ivar inherited his mother's mystical elements, which added an air of intrigue and mysticism to his character. This combination of fierce warrior and strategic mastermind, along with his storied lineage, made Ivar the Boneless a figure of immense respect and fear in Viking lore. Ivar the Boneless is perhaps best known for his enigmatic and unusual nickname, which has sparked much debate among historians and scholars. The origins and meaning behind the name, Boneless, remain uncertain, and various explanations have been proposed over the years. One popular theory, based on Norse sagas, suggests that Ivar may have been born with a physical deformity, such as a condition affecting his bones or mobility. According to the Ragnar Lothbrok saga, Ivar's mother, a slog, warned Ragnar not to consummate their marriage for 3 nights after their wedding, foreseeing that if they did, their child would be born with a physical affliction. However, Ragnar, overcome with desire, ignored her warning, and as a result, Ivar was born with weak or boneless limbs, unable to walk. This version of the story portrays Ivar as a warrior who overcame significant physical limitations to achieve greatness. Another theory posits that Ivar may have been afflicted with a condition such as osteogenesis imperfecta, a disorder that results in fragile bones. This could explain the boneless moniker in a literal sense, indicating that he had a form of physical disability. Despite this, Ivar is consistently depicted as a fearsome and successful leader, which has led many to question whether his supposed physical weakness was exaggerated or even invented to add an element of drama to his story. Alternatively, the nickname may have been metaphorical rather than physical. The Vikings were known for their use of ironic and symbolic nicknames, and boneless could have been a reference to Ivar's exceptional flexibility, agility, or strategic adaptability. In this sense, boneless may have referred to his ability to outthink and outmaneuver his enemies, rather than any physical characteristic. Some historians even suggest that the name could derive from the Latin word for hated, as Ivar was notoriously feared and loathed by his enemies, particularly the Christian Anglo-Saxons. The true meaning of boneless remains a mystery, but what is clear is that Ivar's legacy was not defined by physical limitations. Whether the name referred to a deformity, his agility in battle, or his feared reputation, Ivar's accomplishments as a Viking leader and his place in history were indisputable. His nickname, while intriguing, only adds to the mystique of one of the Viking Age's most formidable figures. Ivar the Boneless first demonstrated his formidable warrior skills at a very young age. His father, Ragnar Lothbrok, was frequently at war with various enemies across Scandinavia, and Ivar's childhood was shaped by these conflicts. According to the sagas, Ivar's first taste of battle came when he was just 7 years old. At this time, Ragnar's enemies, including the Jutes and the Scanians, had risen against him, rejecting his claim to kingship and choosing a rival, Harald, to be their leader. Faced with a significant rebellion, Ragnar called upon every able-bodied person he could muster, even including old men and boys in his army. Despite his youth, Ivar answered his father's call to arms and fought in the battle against these rebels. Despite being a child, Ivar is said to have fought with the strength and skill of a grown man, distinguishing himself in combat. This battle was Ivar's first opportunity to prove his courage and capability on the battlefield, and it marked the beginning of his legendary career as a warrior. From this early age, it was clear that Ivar possessed not only the physical prowess necessary to be a Viking, but also the intelligence and tactical mind that would later make him one of the most feared leaders of his time. As Ivar grew older, he continued to accompany his father on military campaigns, gaining valuable experience and honing his skills as both a fighter and a commander. He learned the intricacies of Viking warfare, from raiding coastal towns to conducting large-scale invasions. His early exposure to battle and the harsh realities of war helped shape him into the ruthless and strategic leader he would later become. This early experience in battle, along with the guidance of his father, laid the foundation for Ivar's future success as a commander and conqueror. His reputation as a fierce warrior and a brilliant tactician began to grow, and it wasn't long before Ivar was leading his own campaigns, carving out his legacy in the Viking world. One of the most defining moments in Ivar the Boneless' life was the tragic death of his father, Ragnar Lothbrok. Ragnar had been captured by King Aella of Northumbria, a Saxon king, and was executed in a gruesome and humiliating manner, thrown into a pit of venomous snakes. This event deeply affected Ivar, filling him with an overwhelming desire for revenge. The death of his father was not just a personal loss, it was also an affront to Ivar's honor and the legacy of his family. For the Vikings, revenge was a deeply ingrained part of their culture, and Ivar vowed to avenge Ragnar's death by killing King Aella. Ivar's approach to avenging his father's death was not one of immediate, reckless retaliation. Instead, he used his cunning and strategic mind to plot his revenge meticulously. When he arrived in England with his fleet, he recognized that he was not yet strong enough to defeat King Aella in open battle. Rather than rushing into conflict, Ivar requested a small piece of land from the king, claiming he wanted to live in peace. King Aella, underestimating Ivar's ambitions, granted his request, believing he had nothing to fear from such a small concession. This move allowed Ivar to gain a foothold in England without raising suspicion. He slowly built up his forces and fortified his position, patiently waiting for the right moment to strike. Eventually, Ivar's brothers, Sigurd and Bjorn, arrived with a massive fleet, and together they formed the Great Heathen Army, the largest Viking force ever to invade England. In the ensuing battle, Ivar and his brothers decisively defeated Aella's forces, capturing the king alive. In a brutal act of vengeance, Ivar and his brothers executed King Aella using the Blood Eagle, a torturous and symbolic form of execution. With Aella's death, Ivar had avenged his father and solidified his reputation as a fierce and cunning leader. This victory marked a turning point in the Viking invasion of England, and Ivar's role in it became legendary. After avenging the death of his father, Ragnar Lothbrok, Ivar the Boneless consolidated his power in England by taking control of Northumbria. Following King Aella's execution, Ivar installed a puppet ruler named Egbert to govern Northumbria on his behalf, while he maintained significant influence over the region. This strategy allowed Ivar to extend his control without being directly tied to the day-to-day governance of the kingdom. For the next 2 years, Ivar ruled northern England, using Northumbria as his base of operations to launch further military campaigns and expand his influence. Ivar's leadership was marked by his cunning and ability to adapt to changing circumstances. In 868, the Great Heathen Army, under Ivar's command, shifted its focus southward and set up winter quarters in Mercia, a significant kingdom in the heart of England. Recognizing the threat posed by the Vikings, the king of Mercia, Burgred, sought assistance from the neighboring kingdom of Wessex. King Athelred of Wessex, along with his brother Alfred, who would later be known as Alfred the Great, answered the call and assembled a combined army to confront Ivar and his forces. However, rather than engaging in direct battle, Ivar once again demonstrated his tactical brilliance. He realized that his army was outnumbered and could not achieve a decisive victory in open combat. Instead of risking defeat, Ivar used diplomacy to his advantage, negotiating a peace treaty known as the Treaty of Nottingham. By securing peace with the combined forces of Mercia and Wessex, Ivar was able to avoid a costly confrontation while maintaining control over his territory. This strategic retreat allowed Ivar to regroup and continue his campaigns elsewhere without weakening his position in England. His ability to use both military strength and diplomacy to further his goals demonstrated his versatility as a leader. Ivar's reputation as a cunning and ruthless Viking commander continued to grow as he expanded his power across Britain and beyond. After securing his position in England, Ivar the Boneless turned his attention to East Anglia, one of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in Britain. In 869, he led his forces into the region, which became a pivotal part of his campaign to dominate the British Isles. Upon hearing of Ivar's arrival, King Edmund of East Anglia sought to negotiate peace, offering to share kingship with Ivar if he agreed to convert to Christianity. However, Ivar, a staunch pagan and fierce enemy of Christians, rejected this offer outright. Instead, he saw it as an opportunity to further demonstrate his dominance over the Christian rulers of England. Rather than accepting King Edmund's terms, Ivar and his Viking forces crushed the East Anglian army in 870 at the Battle of Hoxne. The defeat was swift and brutal, with Ivar's forces easily overwhelming the defenders. After the battle, King Edmund was captured, and Ivar subjected him to a particularly gruesome execution, demonstrating his utter disdain for Christianity and those who opposed his rule. According to accounts, Ivar had Edmund tied to a tree and scourged with whips. Despite being tortured, King Edmund remained steadfast in his faith, refusing to renounce his Christian beliefs. Ivar, angered by Edmund's refusal to submit, ordered his men to execute the king by filling his body with arrows, eventually decapitating him. Edmund's death was a brutal and symbolic act, as Ivar sought to show that no Christian king would be spared from his wrath if they resisted him. King Edmund would later be revered as a martyr and saint in Christian tradition, but at the time, his death marked the end of East Anglia's independence and the beginning of Viking rule in the region. By eliminating yet another royal bloodline and decimating the East Anglian kingdom, Ivar further cemented his legacy as one of the most ruthless and feared Viking leaders. His conquest of East Anglia not only expanded his territorial control but also reinforced his reputation as a merciless conqueror who would stop at nothing to achieve his ambitions. After conquering East Anglia and solidifying his dominance in parts of England, Ivar the Boneless continued his military campaigns, always seeking new lands to plunder and rule. Not content with his victories in England, Ivar turned his attention to Scotland. In 870, he launched an ambitious expedition northward, joining forces with Olaf the White, his ally and co-ruler of Dublin. Together, they set their sights on Dumbarton Rock, a formidable fortress, and the ancient capital of the Kingdom of Strathclyde. This fortress had resisted attacks from many powerful enemies over the years, including the Picts, Scots, and Anglo-Saxons. Ivar and Olaf's campaign was carefully coordinated. While Olaf sailed up the River Clyde with a large fleet of Viking longships, Ivar led his forces north from York, attacking the fortress from land. The siege of Dumbarton Rock lasted for 40 days, with the defenders bravely holding out. However, the fortress's water supply eventually ran dry, and the defenders could no longer hold their position. Ivar's forces stormed the fortress, capturing it and pillaging the entire region. The fall of Dumbarton was a significant victory for Ivar, as it opened the door to further Viking incursions into Scotland. The success of the campaign in Scotland further enhanced Ivar's legendary status as a conqueror and military strategist. His ability to coordinate large-scale attacks, his relentless pursuit of power, and his willingness to conquer any land he set his eyes on made him one of the most feared Viking leaders of his time. The capture of Dumbarton Rock demonstrated Ivar's ability to take on even the most formidable defenses, and it allowed him to expand his influence beyond England, into Scotland and other parts of the British Isles. Despite his many conquests, Ivar's insatiable thirst for new adventures and territories continued to drive him forward. He was never content with ruling. He always sought more lands to conquer, more kingdoms to defeat, and more enemies to crush. This relentless ambition defined much of his life as a Viking leader. In 871, after years of leading military campaigns and expanding his control over England and Scotland, Ivar the Boneless returned to Dublin, where he would reign as the king of the Northmen of all Ireland and Britain. Dublin had long been a significant Viking stronghold, and Ivar's return there solidified his influence over the broader Norse territories in both Ireland and Britain. From his base in Dublin, Ivar continued to exert control over the lands he had conquered, maintaining power through both fear and respect among his Viking followers and the subjugated populations. While Ivar had already achieved an extraordinary level of power and fame through his conquests, he was still not content to simply rule over his vast territories. He remained restless, driven by his insatiable desire for more power, wealth, and military glory. Despite the ruthlessness and brutality that characterized his rule, Ivar was also a shrewd leader, known for his cunning and ability to manipulate situations to his advantage. Whether through negotiation, diplomacy, or outright violence, he consistently found ways to maintain his grip on power and keep his enemies at bay. However, in 873, Ivar's remarkable life came to an end. The exact cause of his death remains unknown, but many speculate that it may have been related to the curse that had followed him throughout his life. Some believe that his boneless condition, whatever its true nature, may have finally claimed his life. Others suggest that he succumbed to illness, battle wounds, or simply the toll of his relentless campaigns. Regardless of the cause, Ivar's death marked the end of an era for the Vikings. In accordance with his wishes, Ivar's body was brought back to England and buried along the coast. Legend has it that Ivar believed his burial site would serve as a talisman, protecting his kingdom from future invaders. His legacy as one of the most feared and successful Viking leaders lived on, and even in death, he sought to maintain his power over the lands he had conquered. Ivar the Boneless, a man of ambition and unparalleled ruthlessness, left an indelible mark on the history of the Viking Age.